Okay. Hey everyone. I'm AJ. This is going to be some card review for the upcoming Magic Hobbit set. Um, the main purpose of this is that I can share with some different groups that I'm interacting with on regard to limited play, card evaluation, discussing strategies for an upcoming set before we get to play it, that kind of thing. But I will post it as well to the public if anyone wants to chime in. I'd love to hear different opinions. I tried to record this for the rares and mythics, but had some issues. But hopefully, this is a lot clearer and cleaner. My approach is generally to identify whatever I think the top shelf cards are. Generally, they're in the mythic or rare category. But what are the best things that the set offers? Um, for this, I picked the Arkenstone because it's a colorless card. It can go into any deck, and maybe you cast the Adventure as an extra bit of bonus. But a 5 mana, all your creatures get a bonus, and you get an extra card. It's not asking much. Like that won't have to be around for very long for the game to finish, because you will end up with just more stuff, so much more stuff than your opponent, and the things you have will be bigger. That is a way I think about cards in general for limited. How do they help you end up in a situation where you have more resources than an opponent? Now, that might mean raw card advantage, a volume of cards, more permanence. It could mean that you finish the game quicker, so you get to spend more mana and use more stuff in your hand than your opponent does when they're still playing a slower developing game. There'll be more detail as I discuss the various cards. I'm going to do commons and uncommons in this sitting. Hopefully get through all of them, but let's see how we go. But yeah, the idea is like I put a benchmark at the top for stuff like the Arkenstone. I think Settle the Wreckage is also going to cause a lot of games to be over very quickly, although I don't know how great it will be. I'm in 2026 Magic, maybe it's worse than before. Um, there's a couple of pretty fantastic green mythics that when you play them, you will get some instant advantage and produce, well, relatively instant advantage and produce this kind of continuous, problematic, growing threat. One of the ways that as well that I do like to look at cards is to just follow that cookie cutter template of I want them to do something the turn they come in. So, for instance, with Dancing from Dusk to Dawn or Dark to Dawn, I would consider that to be at least a turn 6 play, or 5 mana plus a land drop, because I want to make sure I get something out of it straight away. A little bit different here because it's an enchantment, harder to kill than a creature. Similar with like, where is he gone? Gollum. Assuming that you can pick correctly on odd or even, like with knowledge of the set and removal, um, you will almost certainly be able to get a card from it, from whatever your opponent uses to interact with it. Um, so yeah, those cards that just don't ask much and give you in the region of 2 or more full cards worth of an effect, or what end up being in the top shelf category for me. And then down in the other is things that are just really conditional or just too expensive. Glamdring is one example of something that's just so conditional. Um, there's also a tension there that it wants you to have a deck that has lots of instant and sorceries, while also wanting to have a critical mass of creatures that you can actually equip it and get the bonus. Neither of those two parts add up to relevant for me. I think if your opponent taps 4 mana to cast Gleam of Death and mills 6 and maybe puts 2 or 3 cards from their graveyard into their hand, you're going to be pretty happy that they've used that mana just to buff their hand a little bit rather than develop and play to the board. It's a really conditional card draw spell. Something else, like an example I've put down in the F category of roll, 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 roll. I could be wrong here, but spending 3 mana on a card in the hope that you have 4 relevant enter or leave the battlefield triggers for this to actually do anything. And I try and consider the fail case of cards rather than the use case, although that is the main functionality, or the typical expected use case, is what I do look at. But I think you need to look at the fail case, which is you just don't have anything that has a trigger on leaving or entering, and then it's just 3 mana and a card from your hand for no effect. So they ended up being in the bottom rung of the ladder. And there's various distributions in between. And one of the things I noticed before I get it straight into the commons and uncommons is I needed to read the cards carefully. And you see, that's the old adage of reading the cards explains the cards. One of the examples I would give is red. I'm not familiar with the names yet. There we go. The Misty Mountain's Cold. I think this is still a good card. In principle, red 2 for some number of treasures and a 6/6 flying dragon. That's pretty great. Originally, when I read it, I thought you could create more than one dragon, but no, it sacrifices the saga. So yeah, just being quite careful and reading the specifics of how the cards work, because it can change the evaluation quite considerably. Okay, so let's filter and go top down in rarity as we began with Mythic, then move to rare. And let's pick an uncommon and start this. Okay, Gathering of Darkness. So effectively a 3/3 Gravedigger for 4 mana. Gravedigger is probably a little dated in that paying 4 mana for a 2/2 body, like you're paying 3 mana effectively for a 2/2 with the Raised Dead effect worth the black in a single card. This gives you an extra power and toughness, and it has the function that if you already have an army of in play, maybe you turn a 1/1 into a 4/4 or a 2/2 into a 5/5, and that's pretty significant. I think this is going to be relevant. It's got a little tension in that I don't know how many yet of the black creatures are expected to be amass tokens, and you can't get those back. So there's probably a little bit of mitigation going on there, and it's time sensitive. I'm going to give it probably a B. I think 3/3 plus Raised Dead is significant enough to warrant a B. So Gnashing of Teeth, 3 mana, choose one. It's sorcery speed. There are some tokens. The functionality of this looks pretty great. Yes, you do have to be somewhat heavy black. Yes, it is a sorcery, but apart from a small number of like 5 and 6 mana creatures, the -5/-5 will kill and indeed exile anything. Excuse me. And maybe the other mode is better in that if you face some of the recruit decks that are producing tokens, -1 to their team is pretty backbreaking. I think this is premium uncommon removal in black. I think I'm going to give it a B+. If it were straight up Doomblade or Terror, I would say it's comparable. But this has got a little more, as far as like the grading is concerned. This is a little more expensive than those 2 mana and the sorcery aspect, but the flexibility and the exile effect is nothing to be sniffed at. I think that's probably among the best removal I've seen in the set so far. This one, when it enters, you can recruit. So we've got our Oblivion Ring variant. I spoke about recruit in the previous one, but it obviously didn't get recorded, so I'll reiterate my stance here. I still am not sure how it will play out. I'm a little skeptical. Obviously, having just draw and discard, like regardless of whether you can trigger some extra effect on recruit or in the previous sets with Connive, that's better than it not being there. Like it makes a very big difference. There is a tension in that. I think some players may kind of default to, and I saw this in Marvel a lot, like discarding an actual spell for something that's a +1/+1 counter. It's significantly less than the spell you have in your hand, or cycling a land cycler when you could just maybe wait a turn and cast it as another creature. I just think people need to be a little more careful and not assume the recruit is a default to try to create the human soldier token. There's nothing forcing you, reading it as just draw and discard, and then maybe in some certain situations with like a card that cares about being in the graveyard or an extra spell that's actually not as relevant as a 1/1. But the problem is, so many of the spells in Magic, the way they're built, they're going to be more than a 1/1 token. So the short of this is I'm not really reviewing the cards that say recruit with the default assumption that they will come with a 1/1 token. I'm reviewing them that they have a default inbuilt loot. This for 3 is a premium kind of B level white removal spell, and has been in various sets and incarnations, Wipe Up, Oblivion Ring, Banishing Light, etc. Adding the draw and discard is probably mitigating the extra mana, so I'll still give it a B. Dane, Lord of Iron Hills. 2 mana, 2/2 Vigilance, okay. And it gives the propaganda tax if you are storied. From reviewing the card so far and from what I've seen, it looks pretty trivial to be storied. Like, I think you might actually have to go out of your way to not be storied if you're white or white-red. You'll just naturally have artifacts and equipment because those are the cards you draft. So that is a little kind of contextual part of the evaluation of storied. It's not nothing that they have to that you tax the creatures, but it's still like a 2/2 vigilance for 2. Vigilance doesn't matter that much. Like, if it attacks, it often it's just trading off. But it is nice it's better than it not being there. I think this is probably going to play out like a C. Like, I don't know how relevant the second ability will play. It's probably good in mirror matchups where, like, there's wide boards or people are also making 1/1 tokens. That tax is relevant, but I think overall it's just a kind of D-level card with an extra bit of text. 5 mana 4/4 whenever you attack Amass Goblins 2. It doesn't pass the test of it produces something immediately, either an enter trigger or a leave play trigger if your opponent deals with it. It does have that clause of, well, if I untap and then attack with this. Actually, this is where reading the cards carefully come in. No. You play this on turn 5 and you immediately get to amass, assuming you have any other creature. It's not whenever this attacks, it's whenever you attack. That's pretty great. Imagine that other creature is an Amass Goblin 2 army already, and now suddenly you've made it a 4/4. I think I'm going to give this a B. Yeah. I was going to try and, like, could I justify B+? I don't think it falls into that range that's, like, approaching rare level or just the best removal in the set. It's a little bit less than that, I think, but still pretty great card. 6 mana, 4/3 reach. That's pretty strong. Can target your opponent as well. So it can just be 6 mana burnt, like 3 damage to your opponent. Relevant body, there are tokens to kill. 6 mana, I think I'm going to go B- for this. I think I would prefer the other one. Like, the difference between 4 and 5 is a lot less than the difference between 5 and 6. And the body is a little weak for a 6-drop, but the effect is very relevant. Interesting. So the baseline of Amass, I think, is get to a 2/2 or 3/3 army and then try and trade it off and then repeat the process. Of course, if you just cast 2 or 3 non-creature spells and you've already got a 3/3, you end up making it a 5/5, 6/6, and the opponent has to deal with that in some fashion. I haven't gotten there yet, but I know there's a lot of common equipment, and like I mentioned before, how many of the red and or black cards are like non-creature spells that amass. So maybe this is kind of doing double duty, and it's just a 2 mana 2/2, and the quality ones are incredibly rare in recent sets. It's not that they're rare, sometimes they are, sometimes there's just not actually a lot of quality ones. from my opinion. But there's other times where just when you're drafting, because there's a low number of quality ones in sets, they just get snapped up, so they're difficult to come by. Um, I think this might be like a B. Yeah, I think you're going to want to have this in almost every red deck. And like I said, some of the equipment ends up coming in and making a token. Some of the non-creature spells have a mass on them. Like we saw that Gravediggery thing, like Raise Dead plus a mass 3. So for that, it would be get a creature back, a mass 4. That's a pretty big difference on a card that you already want to play for a curve reason. So yeah, I think I quite like Bothersome Noisemaker. Flying Death Touch. Death Touch is not that relevant on this. I mean, yeah, it can be useful in a defensive position against like bigger green creatures, but 4 power is already a lot. It'll kill or trade with most things. The 2 toughness is a problem. Having it cost 2, obviously a 2 mana 4/2 flying Death Touch is great. How often that will happen, we've been taught, I think, from Historic that like outside of having free sacrifice outlets in your deck, it's not trivial to make sure something dies. Um, huh. I'm thinking about the amass stuff going on, and like maybe the opponent wants to block smaller amass tokens because they don't want it getting out of hand and making it too big for them to be able to block later. So it probably makes it a little easier to try and get something to die. This is fantastic, obviously, if it's turn like 4 or 5 and you have combat where something died and then you play this and a 2 drop and this and a 3 drop. That seems like a pretty amazing turn. I still think it's conditional enough, and 5 mana for a 4/2 flyer is not that great these days, like especially the toughness side of things. I'm just going to give it a C plus. It may end up being a bit better, but I think this will play out a little worse than it might look on the surface. Ugh. We've had this as a 1/1. Now it's a 1/2, and it was kind of mediocre before. Like it could get played. Um, yeah, it works with the recruit thing where you're drawing and discarding. That'll trigger it every time. I still think it plays out like a pretty average creature. Um, Similar with this, I think it probably plays out as a pretty average creature. If it were just a 4/5 for 5 mana, and you need 2 other creatures for that to be the case, so it's conditional. Like it's certainly big. Like you could, I'm sure there's going to be games where you cast this on turn 5 and then attack for like 7, 6 or 7 the following turn. That's a lot of damage. Its toughness will matter. Like I'd have to check. This is something that'll probably adjust later, but like how many of the removal spells kill it? We've seen the black one does 5 -5 -5 for 3 mana. Um, it's a big flyer, but it's still quite conditional. I think it ends up being around a C. I'm not. I think especially because it's a 5, like you need your 5s to be pretty impactful and important, and this doesn't always um, end up being so. Old fat spider cannot see me. Interesting. So it's the good bit is chapters 3 and 4, just divination in installments. You can give something hexproof and then prevent all damage that would be dealt up to 1 target creature. So it sort of freezes a creature. It stops a creature from attacking for chapters 2, 3, and 4. I think this is quite good. It is situational. I can see it going into decks. Like I'll give my. I'm imagining like you've got a 4 mana flyer. Turn 5, you play this. you give your flyer hexproof so that they can't target it in combat. Maybe play another 2-drop, then you're locking down one of their creatures or preventing it from damaging you. I don't think any of the individual steps are that significant, but adding them up together for 3 mana is. I think I like this. I'm going to go B-. 3 mana, 2/3 with a free sacrifice. You can, I guess the idea is you churn through amass tokens. Yeah, this is probably okay. Just the ability to not spend any mana and have some beneficial effect is relevant. I'm going to go C+. Chief Warg, 3/3. Whenever it attacks while you control a creature of power 4 or greater, you draw a card and lose a life. Okay. So you really do want this to be seeing some creature with power 4 or greater. It doesn't pass the immediate I play this and get a benefit, or I'm assured a benefit in some fashion. But 4 mana for a 3/3 menace is a fine deal, and you might have a different creature with power 4 or greater that you attack with or that you control when you're making an attack on the turn you cast the Chief Warg, so I quite like this. B range, I would say. That's a lot of words. I mean, if it just said when it enters draw a card, that would be fantastic. Okay, you discard a card. But if it's a land, it comes back, so it's like draw a card and get a land drop. And then this looks very good to me. I think it's in this sort of range. I will say B because you can't be guaranteed, like you're not guaranteed to have the land. Usually when it gets to turn 4 or 5, you're approaching low to no land cards in your hand. But the fact that it gets to come back and you still get to draw and discard is pretty great. The 3/2 stats are not great for 4 mana, but they're not embarrassing either. I could see this being better than B, but I'm going to land on B for the moment. 4 mana at the beginning of combat. If you draw 2 or more cards, another creature you control gets +3/+0 against first strike. Okay, we've seen those effects like where every combat you get a free +1/+0 on first strike or +1/+0 on menace. +3/+0 is a lot, but you've already drawn 2 or more cards, so you're probably getting ahead anyway. The thing is, a 3/4 for 4 mana is not the worst return for a card from your hand, and turning any creature into an almost impossible to deal with in combat chunker, yeah, that's appealing. And all you have to do is trigger a recruit ability on something else in your turn. Doesn't really do much on your opponent's turn apart from be a 3/4. Oh, it's not combat. It's not at the beginning of combat. It's beginning of combat on your turn. So yeah, the text only triggers on your turn. I'm gonna say B- for this. I think it's maybe C+. It's in that range. It's just how reliably, very quickly after playing the couple of games with this set, we'll know like how reliably are we triggering recruit. Not getting a token, just having the ability to draw and discard. So 5 mana enters and sort of edict. That's pretty good. I guess the idea is that you're throwing an army onto something else so that you can reset your army and your further amass then like grows again. 5 mana 5/5 is nothing to be sniffed at. That's a decent body for black red, and it's got a very relevant enter playability. We've seen things like the eagle or that vulture thing, the 4/2 that gets 3 mana reduction if a creature has died. Like, that plays pretty well with Bolg. Granted, that's 7 mana, but just the ability I'm saying, to have a sacrifice outlet when it enters. You don't want to have, like, you can go back to you can only have so many 5s. They have to be good. And the thing is, this one is. I'm going to go B for Bolg. Yeah, 5 mana 5/5. That if it were just 5 mana 5/5, when it enters, each player sacrifices a creature, I think that would be a B. This can be a bit worse than that, and it can be a bit better. So overall, I think it lands in that range. 3/6 for 5. 3/6. But it has to attack. It's not when you attack, it's when it attacks. It's, yes, putting a +1/+1 counter on each creature you control is great, but you do have to get to the stage where this is attacking for that to happen. Yes, it will attack then as a 4/7, which is enormous, but it is just a monster for 5 mana. It's just stats. It's a conditional bonus, and yeah, that, I think, is just an aspect of Magic that's a little bit dated in this kind of era of the game. I'm gonna go. It's not nothing. I'm gonna go C- on Willer on Scrounger. Um, 6 mana 4/4 is a lot, but it gives your armies menace, I guess, and it has Clap Snap. A 2 mana 2/2 army that draws you Great Ugly Looking Goblin to play later is pretty great, I think. We're talking often about having more stuff than your opponent, more resources, and this just is a 2-for-1. It's just straight up a 2/2 that draws you this card when it's adventured. And yeah, maybe later on you have a large army in play, you play this, and suddenly has menace and makes blocking like much worse for your opponent. Maybe they would have double blocked anyway if it's big enough. I'm not sure. I think the cheaper instant sorcery effects that amass, I think they might be a bit better than they might read. I'm thinking about that noisemaker that cared about instant and sorceries. I'm going to give this a B, which may be a little higher than I would normally, because 6 mana for a 4/4 is not that much. It's not that great a card, but it's a free card with Clap Snap. Bilbo wearing his Donald Duck outfit, I see, with no pants. Is it Hornswoggle? No, it's not Hornswoggle. There's Burglar's Plot has been switcheroo. That's been printed in a bunch of sets. It originally, I think, began as like, oh, this is amazing. I'll give some random shitty token and I'll take their biggest creature. There are some tokens in this set, but it just turned out it was quite time sensitive. Like, you had to have a decent target. They could respond and stop the effect altogether because you don't have one of the exchange targets left. But 2 mana 1/1 that loots, that's great. I'm gonna go B-. There was a version of this, I think, in Bloomburrow, 2 mana 1/1, and then if you had Threshold or something, you didn't discard, but like the major part of the use case for that was 2 mana 1/1 unblockable that when you attack you loot. That's huge. And yeah, sometimes maybe Burglar's Plot comes up. Bard the Bowman. 3 mana 1/3 reach. That's not a great stat line, and you need to draw your second card. So yes, it's doing that recruit synergy, of course. It's not that big a deal, though. It's not nothing, but it's not nothing on a card that's already a little subpar, I would say. And the lifelink, I think, might be less useful in blue-white if you're doing recruit stuff. If just as an overarching idea, the creatures are a little bit smaller, so the lifelink is less relevant, although they do get the counters. I think this is on the poor side for a kind of signpost on common. I'm going to give it a C-. 2 mana 1/2. I mean, obviously great in elves. It's like a 2 mana 2/3 vigilance, but Woodland Weave Master. We can actually check now on 17 lands how many elves are in the format. There's 16. It's not huge. It's I don't know how many elves you can realistically have in your limited deck. If you can get into that 8, 9, 10 threshold, you'll be laughing. This will be fantastic. It'll be like a B- B level card. Otherwise, I think it's often a 1/2 for 2. I think this might end up being quite poor. And even with the consideration that elves are around, I still think I'd give it a D+. Even if the set had if the set had 30 elves, I might jump it up an entire grade into this like C+ level, but I expect if you get 5 or 6 elves in a deck, that's probably a lot. And 5 or 6 is not enough for this to be it's not a sufficient density for this to be live, in my mind. So 3 mana recruit, then return a creature from your graveyard to the battlefield. Oh, okay. So the way we can read this is, assuming everything goes right. So you play it, you draw a card, you discard a creature with mana value 3 or less, and you get a token. Then the creature comes back. So you paid 3 mana for a token and a card. Because you haven't lost the creature. So you get 3 mana, you get a token, you get the card you draw from the recruit, and you get your 3 mana back because you don't pay for the 3-drop that was in your hand. Then you put a +1/+1 counter on a creature. So effectively, this is net 0 mana, draw a card, get 2 power and toughness. If it was... So, Hero in Training. It's Hero in Training for this set. Hero in Training was just white 2, 2/2 when it entered draw card. This has extra steps, but this is potentially 0 mana instead of 3 mana, because you're getting the mana as a rebate because you don't pay for the 3 mana. It's got a little more setup, but a 0 mana Hero in Training would be an A. A+ maybe. Like, you would play as many of those as you could fit in your 40 card deck. Like, you just play 40 of them, realistically. Of course, it's not that. I think it's going to be very high. I'm going to give this a B+. This may be the first sort of hot take. It's slow. I think maybe I'll temper my grade a little bit and say B, because it is slow. Sometimes you would prefer not to have to play this, draw and discard, and then next turn you get your 3-drop back. So turn 5 by the time you get to attack with that 3-drop, whereas you could have just played it on turn 3. But breaking it down and having the effect of being a net 0 mana Hero in Training, I think is good enough to get a B for me. They could have just said threshold +2/+0, but they didn't. 1/3 for 2 vigilance is a fine body, especially when there's amass tokens going around that start as 1/1s or 2/2s. When there's recruit tokens, I can see drafting 2 or maybe 3 of these, which is not unrealistic given it's a small set and having the mill be a win condition. I'm going to give this a B-. Part of that is it being a win condition element, but mostly it is the vigilance 1/3 for 2 mana, but it's got this extra part that you can build around, and that's something I should have mentioned. I don't really rate cards or view them as specific sideboard or specific build around. The example I always give is, well, Lightning Strike or Lightning Bolt. That's a build around because you need to build around having 3 damage for a low amount of mana being relevant in your deck. You have to build it with red sources in your lands. There's always a build around aspect, is my point. So I try to consider all of the different elements baked into the single card to give the evaluation. I am interested to hear thoughts on that, by the way. I might try and have another video made for specifically the public to try and get a lot of these kind of perspectives I have on Limited from over the years into some cohesive presentation. But yeah, I'm rating this partly as it's a 1/3 vigilance, partly because it can be a 3/3 for 2 mana, partly because I can draft around them and have a strategy that's like, I have 2 of these in play. You only need to mill for 6 like 3 times, 4 times before that ends up being irrelevant. Maybe it just the grading or the tier drops off a cliff if the format turns out to be super fast. But the thing is, a 1/3 for 2 mana is a pretty good defensive body in a fast environment. That's a really weird picture. It looked like this was some sort of octopus thing, and then I realized it was a talon. Recursive threat. I mean, the idea is that you put it on a recruit token. I don't think you ever want to just tap 4 mana and play +2/+2 and flying on something. We had a card, been in a couple of sets, maybe it's had different names, of like blue 4, when it enters draw a card, creature gets +2/+2 and flying. Originally, like, oh, that was amazing because it replaces itself. You don't run the risk of getting 2 for 1 when your opponent kills your creature from underneath it, but you still kind of do because they can respond at instant speed, and there's so many games where you just can't afford to cross your fingers and go, well, if they don't have it, I'm fine. And it's a trap I fall into all the time. It's really sloppy in my arena play, but it is true that you just shouldn't do that. And I think this might read pretty good, and it gives, like, it turns anything into a relevant threat, really, and it can come back, but that is mitigated with it's turn 4, I have a 2/2 and a 3/3 in play, and my opponent has some open mana. Do I cast this? Probably not. Like, I still am not intimately familiar with all the removal and interaction, but I'm assuming there's at least some. I'm going to go quite low on this. I might be wrong. Maybe the idea that you can just keep returning it and make every recruit into a threat, but I think I'm going to begin here. 5/3 for 3, and again, like, I'm just reading storied. It looks difficult to not be storied in red white. 5/3 for 3 is just good. Yeah, that's a very large amount of power. And if you somehow don't have storied on turn 4 when this might untap, you can still just block with it and trade off with almost anything. This is interesting. It's a nice way of giving a nod to the idea that it's a small set and there's common legends. The main idea is that it's 2-tap, target creature can't be blocked this turn. This, I would say, fits into the sideboard category, and given that's the case, because it has functionality or use cases against very specific subset of decks or archetypes, that means against a broader field, you'll only have a good use for this against a small subset, which means it's kind of a low-rated card. I will say D. Excuse me. If easy pickings is cast, that's going to be fantastic. The mana ramp from it is okay on glowing. It is a little bit similar in like I don't know how often easy pickings is going to be cast. If it is cast before you get to, like, if easy pickings is the main card and it draws you a Glow in the Mighty in the Adventure Zone, then this would be in the B range. If it's not and Glowing is the card that you rely on, it's quite a good deal worse. I think I'm going to give it a C+ overall. What an odd card. So on turn 6, you get an extra mana. On turn 7, you get an extra mana. So you get your 8-drop on turn 7 with Burn, Burn, Free Infern. It's front-loaded as a non-creature spell that does 6 damage. Well, of course, non-creature, it's Saga. 6 damage to creature and opponent controls. You might snag an equipment or like a food token or something, but 6 mana, 4 damage, sorcery speed. Yeah, that's fine. This is an odd one. Like, its benefit is that it's 1 mana. Oh, it's such a cheap creature. But it won't actually get the counter until later in the game. So maybe you get 1 attack in and then it sort of sits around waiting for a bigger creature to learn from before it can grow enough to get back into battle. I think this might be quite poor. There are some good interactions with it. Like, I know, as was pointed out, like there's a 2 mana card at common that you can pay 2 life and turn it into a 4/4, but I think it's probably turn 3 or more before the nasty little rabbit gets any counters. And then it might, because it's at that stage in the game and it's not like turn 2 or turn 3, instead it's like turn 3 into turn 4, maybe later, before it gets its first counter. So it's not like attacking on turn 3 as a 3/4. It's probably attacking on turn 3 as a 2/3, or attacking on turn 4 as a 2/3, which is probably small enough that it has to wait around again and grow a bit more. I don't think this plays out very well. There'll be certainly games where your opponent goes like, play 2 of these in the first couple of turns, turn 3 play a 4-power monster, and they just keep growing and you've lost. But I think overall it's probably around here. 2 mana equips dwarf +2/+2. That's a lot. Later in the Marvel set, I started people playing the Vibranium Daggers, which was like 1 mana, equip 3, +2/+2. This is a free equip on a dwarf, so it is maybe secretly a red-white card. I wasn't a fan of the daggers, but I was sort of reluctantly impressed a bit by them because it had a significant enough effect that your creature got big enough to tussle. It wasn't like a dud, which I assumed it was all the way through the format. In Marvel, this is different. It's likely to just get an instant equip, and it counts for storied. And later on, yeah, like when you don't have dwarves or you need to share it around, you can probably afford the 3 mana. Ward 1 is not nothing. Makes the creature it's equipped to more difficult to kill, which means you're that little tiny bit less likely to need to pay the equip cost of 3 later on. I'm going to give this a C+. I think it's a card I will be happy to have a copy of in a lot of my red or red-white decks. Savannah Lion is fine. I'm not sure how relevant this ability will be. 3 mana 1/1 dies into a 4/4. Can they just ignore it? I guess it means like they can't really attack if they want to do that. 3 mana 4/4 is a lot, but it is conditional. Maybe you've already got like an army, like let's say that Clap Snap is a 2/2. Then you play this. If you manage to get it to die, that original army is now a 6/6. That's huge. I'm not sure how trivial it is to have this die. I suspect, thinking back to the idea of the 4/2 buzzard thingy, getting morbid is not an automatic thing. Having this die is not automatic. It's likely. It means like if your opponent doesn't want it to die, they sort of have to stop attacking on the ground. But the return, like 3 mana for a 1/1, is obviously woeful. This is difficult to grade. I'm expecting it'll play out in this kind of range. I'll give it a C+, just as a slight benefit of doubt that it is. You will be able to get the Yamas without too much trouble, or it won't be too unreliable. One double strike has been fine in many limited sets. This gives you the shortest of swords. In fact, it's so short it's an axe. Probably a C. Like, +1/+0 is not nothing. It's not a very good effect, but it isn't nothing. And there's other equipment floating around. But this is not like a million miles away from just being a 2/2 for 2 mana. Large bear likes his fishes. That's a chunker. There's not really a lot to be unhappy about there. Charging Monstrosaur with haste, or with a reach. Yeah, I think this is probably just a B. Like, it gets around that I have to, like, it gives me something straight away because it has haste. It gives you the effect of the creature immediately, so if they kill it, at least you've gotten an attack in. Yeah, that's pretty good. This was the one that was pointed out with the Wabbit. Yeah, this looks good. Just being able to trigger Ferocious for 2 mana is great. And it just attacks and block. Like, it's so difficult to attack and block into, or attack into, because it's your opponent just has to see it as a 4/4. Of course, you don't have to pay the 2 life. It's that old threat of activation thing. I think this is probably going to play out like a B. I think this is a very premium 2-drop. Almost certainly going to have storied when you play Biffer on turn 6. So when it enters, you put 2 +1/+1. Is this Grave Titan? This is Grave Titan. 2/2 every time it enters or attacks. Yep. Okay. I don't know how much splashing is going to be involved. From what I see, it's a 5 color pair set. 4 mana to get a land into play and a land into your hand, plus maybe saving some life from blocking. It can go into any deck. Probably a D+. I'm sure it'll get played at some point, but it's not super exciting. If there were more reasons for splashing, I think I'd be very happy with it. Or maybe like if there ends up being a control deck that likes to continuously make its land drops not just through turn 5 or 6, but to like 5 or 6, but like turn 6, 7, 8, 9, getting those 2 extra lands can be relevant while having a body to block. But because it's tap, You can't just like play it, chump block their 5 or 6 drop, and sacrifice it in the same turn cycle, which is a bit disappointing. They've been very careful with the naming of this and not called it Stoned by Sunlight. Um, Not something I partake in myself, but I certainly know a lot of people that may end up being stoned by sunlight on a camping trip. No judgment. Destroy target creature with power 4 or greater until end of turn. These effects have generally been good, like Murdoch's Crusade was an overperformer. Not sure how many creatures with power 4 or greater in this set. It looks like it has that sort of divide where there's a bunch of red and white and blue stuff that are smaller, and there's a bunch of like some black, green, and red stuff that end up in the bigger region. Um, I'm going to say C+. I think you'll generally be happy with an effect like this in your white deck. Down to Goblin Town. They've had this effect a few times. There's been like coercion. In fact, wasn't there in War of the Spark, wasn't there a literal 3 mana coercion amass 1? And that ended up playing out considerably better than just the 3 mana coercion effect that we've seen a bunch of times. The last 2 chapters, whatever, like you drain for a little bit. I'm gonna give it a C. Because you don't get everything at the same time isn't great. Maybe C minus. I would prefer if it was just 3 mana. You take a card from their hand and then get an army straight away. Three mana scales with lands. It's the most trained of Armadons. It is an elf. Still probably a C minus. Maybe C. Two mana can't block, but potentially can keep coming back, keep making your opponent lose 2 life. I don't hate this. I think you obviously need it to be in an aggressive deck. But that's irritating to have to play against. It does take a lot. Like it's 4 mana, sacrifice something, and it comes back to your hand as a sorcery, and then you have to replay it. How much better is it than like reassembling skeleton? I think it's enough better. Like the first part is quite relevant. I'm gonna say C plus, a little bit higher than I might otherwise be in for this sort of recursive effect. But I think it's quite cool. Plus, like that sacrifice part, we saw the 3 mana 1/1 goblin that it dies into a 4/4 amass token. So having sacrifice outlets seems to be relevant in this set. 3/2 trample, something that's almost flavor text but not quite. Yeah, you'll take it. This will be played at any time you're red white. C plus. 1 mana, 1/1 menace, and can attack. This black green ferocious deck is starting to look quite aggressive. Like that looks like it's all about attacking. Like just even the examples we've seen, the uncommons here. We've got this Night Hell Pursuer. The Golem we saw. The Rabbit. Yeah, that grows with Ferocious. The 2 mana 2/2 that you pay 2 life to make it a 4/4. Yeah, that's significant. I think this might play out quite well. It's it's a little better than a typical card, and like our middling factor, if we take all 13 of these, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, so middle is there. So C plus is the center. Yeah, I kind of like C plus for this. I think it's at least in that average range, if not a little bit above. This is reminiscent of a card. It's not the elf enchantment from Lorwyn Eclipsed, but there was something like this where like it gave a continuous effect, and then at some point later you just pump mana into it and got a big creature, and it played out quite well. This is time sensitive. The thing is, you just need to get like 2 counters on this is enough, because you're paying 2 mana in a card for two worth of stats. You'll often have to play those just for curve reasons in your deck. If you do get it early, it's not great on turn 2, obviously, because you need a creature. But like on turn 4, going that doesn't really work either. I was going turn 4, you play this, play a 2-drop, but you need to play the land first, so you'd need to have something in play. Maybe it's just it might read well, but you might just not have the opportune time to develop your board in such a way where you get the counter from this immediately, which is, I think, what you need to do. It's more like it's a turn 4 play if you've got a 2 or a 3, because you don't want to play this on turn 3 and then play a land and then lose the mana. You don't do anything. You've turned your 2-drop into a 3-drop, I guess. Similar problem on turn 4. Turn 5, you can play this, play a 2-drop, then play a land and make the 2-drop better. Yeah, the more I talk myself through this, the worse it's kind of getting. I can't remember the name of the card I'm thinking about, but I do remember something like this was relevant. Maybe it turned into a worm or something. Amonkhet, maybe. Anyway, we're not talking about Amonkhet, we're talking about the Hobbit. So I think I'm going to begin quite down on this. Just a bit too awkward time-wise and board development-wise. Gone fishing. I guess it saves 2 creatures from removal, or you like block and gone fishing them, but 4 mana is a lot. Do I care about 6 mana for a Ward 2 6/5 Vigilance? Not really. Think I'm a little low on this. Yeah, you probably have much better things to do on turn 4 or turn 6, so I'll give this a D. Still a big body. 3/2, and then landfall, tap a creature an opponent controls. That looks powerful. Like, it is kind of landfall, creature can't block. Yeah. I think I'll be reasonably happy playing this. I'm not sure how often the untap a creature you control will matter. This is the, if all goes well, but this could get stuck in your hands so often. Like, it's similar to that Eagles rescue +2/+2 and flying thing. Like, sorcery speed tapping out for 4 mana and having to target a creature is tricky. The natural development game, though, if your opponent is just like, you play your 2, they play your 2, you play your 3, they play your 3, you play your 4, you get them because they've played their 3 and they're tapped out. The effect is obviously great. I think it probably plays out like a C+. If it was more reliable, like if it was just put 2 +1/+1 counters on a creature and then it deals damage or something rather than fight. If it was an instant, maybe. Like, those kind of small changes would easily put it up into this range. We've all lost troll negotiations. Thranduil, Sindar, and Liege. So you overpay for mulch. You get a 2/3 that pumps your other elves. We've already noted there's only 16. But this does create elf tokens, so I guess the idea is you mulch, then you play this, then you start playing lands. It is more of a turn 5 play though, so you don't have to play the Sylvan Rally, but if you have the opportunity to, sure. So whenever land enters so what happens if you have this on turn 5? So you play a 2/3, you play a land, you get an elf, and it's a 2/2. So for 4 mana, you got a 2/3 and a 2/2. That's pretty great. And it pumps your other elves, and it gives you the Sylvan Rally. I think this is just a B. It is a 1/1 life-linking dwarf for 1 mana that wears equipment pretty well. How many times am I going to cast Concerted Care? Thing is, if you play Concerted Care first, and then you're at some point later casting Buffer as a 1/1 life-linking for a white, you probably don't really care about that. That's not really affecting the board. It's not nothing, of course, it's free, but that means you've cast Concerted Care first, which means it's like into the developmental, like past the developmental stage of the game and into the interactive stage where you're like, you and your opponent are dealing with each other's stuff through combat or removal. And then after that, the return of the 1/1 lifelinker is pretty low. I'm kind of low on this. We saw the troll trick. I think that's better as a combat trick because it has a functionality outside of the protection, whereas this has much lower functionality outside of the protection. I'm going to give it a D. Interesting. I was going to say there haven't been, like, I spoke about that divide between the kind of mana value of the good cards in the various colors that I've seen so far. Sort of split between the Jeskai being low and then black-green being higher, and maybe there's some shared in red that some of it's low, some of it's high. I was thinking, well, there's not really that many expensive cards that I care about countering, and usually that's where cancel effects are best when you're trading it up in mana. But then when you counter something cheaper, you do get to draw and discard. Countering a 3-drop sucks. Countering a 4-drop or more, you're getting at least ahead in mana. It's still conditional. I don't know how often you're going to have 3 mana open in this set. It looks like something, a set that you just want to keep playing to the board. I'm going to end up with a D+ here overall. Galleon Bottles the Elven King. Whenever Galleon attacks, choose up to a creature you control. Its base power and toughness come equal to that. 4/4, 4 cost, 4 power, 4 toughness, and it can turn something else like a token or a 1/1 into, but that's when it attacks. It's fine. Honestly, I think I just rating it as 2 green for a 4/4, and then if the ability matters at some point, sure. Board Stabilizer doesn't give the life, but is very difficult to, like, not difficult to block it. Well, it sort of is. It can't be chumped easily. They're using a real creature or creatures if they get in front of it. And when they target, you get to draw a card. I'm not sure how much this 6 mana giant biggest creature on the board thing, like Honey Mammoth, Colossal Dreadmaw sort of cards, are how good they're going to be in this set. But it's a good return. Like, all of the different elements and aspects of the card are good. you're not going to get killed in combat if this stays around. Like, it's just so big, and it has reach for the defensive aspect. Still 6 mana. How much of that is you gonna? It's probably something like a C. Could be wrong. Two mana that replaces itself, and then 2 tap, draw, and discard. This would be broken in previous sets and in sets gone by. Dating myself here, but like Jalum Tome from Antiquities was similar, but I think it cost 3 or 6 mana or something silly like that. Maybe I'm thinking of Jandor's Ring, I don't know. 2 mana to get a land, and then later on you have the ability to loot, turn all your lands into spells, perhaps trigger some draw 2 cards in a single turn effects. I think this is going to be significantly better in sealed than it is in draft, and I'm kind of rating these with a view on draft at the beginning. Combining them together, it's difficult. Like, I think in sealed I'd go like C+, and in draft I might go down as low as a D. I think overall we'll say C-. 3 mana to do 1 damage, and then so it's 4 mana to get a 1/1 reach. The flash part is odd because it doesn't auto-equip, it just does 1 damage. I'm not so sure I like this card, and there's only 4 dragons in the set, so it's not like the Black Arrow trigger for dragon is going to matter that much. It will certainly mean the first time I play Smog that it'll die to the Black Arrow. I think this is quite poor. Just a lot of mana for a very small effect. Hey, okay, counter spell. If a permanent is countered, exile it instead of putting it. You may cast the card without paying its mana value for as long as it remains exiled. What? It's just Commandeer for permanents, of which permanents are the majority of limited decks. Yes, Strixhaven can reduce, like, had a load of spells, and yes, like, there's instant and sorceries that make amass tokens and recruit things here, but overall 6 mana is a lot though, but it is saying like it's at the stage of the game where the thing you're countering is going to be among the last big spells in your opponent's hand that they have before they get into top decking mode. I love cards like this. I think when they resolve, it will be absolutely backbreaking. I think I need to temper the view and say that overall it probably plays out like a C, that it can be quite a few steps below and quite a few steps above, depending on the exact circumstances. And I think that's it for the uncommons. Okay, we just have the commons to go. We're now 1 hour and 8 minutes in, so I might leave that here. Save the changes and then post this and let people have a look and see what they think. All right, thanks very much, folks. I'll be back with the commons and maybe some just overall thoughts on the cards that I've read so far, and the full set, obviously, when I get through the commons later on. All right, thanks very much. Bye.